and welcome to an all-killer no-thriller edition of a weekly Waypoint, the show where I talk about my week and the things that interest me. That's right, I'm adding a new thing on the end of the intro because it might be good to tell people what this series is all about when they click on the video. As for the all-killer no-thriller bit, you are about to see that I have done something slightly different with this week's video, or at least with the first half of it. I recorded 2 matches of Halo. Yes, that was a jump cut, you saw that. I recorded 2 matches of Halo, but they were both 12 minutes long, and I didn't want to do a 24-minute edition of a weekly Waypoint, so instead I went in and I did what I guess some YouTubers probably do. I don't really watch a lot of this kind of content, but I went and I clipped out all of the parts which are just me running around and picking up weapons. I kept in all of my kills, all of my deaths, and some just random bits in between that may be funny or interesting. I only did this for one of the 2 matches for 2 reasons. First of all, after I did that for this first match, I cut out 6 minutes worth of walking around. But that meant that if I did the same for the second match, then it would be like an 8-minute edition of a weekly Waypoint, which is also not something I want to do. But also I would just like to contrast the 2 methods side by side. The only issue with cutting out everything between the killings and the deaths is that it does take an extra, I don't know, I would say 10 to 15 minutes worth of editing time, which on my week off is perfectly fine, but in a week where I'm doing lots of overtime and stuff, may not be quite so cool. But then I'm not always doing stuff like Halo. Sometimes I'm doing racing games where it wouldn't make sense to cut out random parts. Another downside is I think this highlights just how often I die in these games. Because I always say it's because I was brought up on Unreal Tournament, where death came fast and, you know, surviving didn't really matter as much as in games like Battle Royales and stuff like that, and Counter-Strike and elimination style games. So I'm very bad at looking out for my own health in these games. I rush in sometimes when I'm not supposed to, or I don't bother to stay and recoup my health. Did I say recoup? Is it recoup? But yeah, even in games like this one where I get a decent amount of kills, I'm not entirely sure I break even on the kill-death ratio. Oh well, doesn't matter. Had fun! But yeah, in terms of editing the video, I'm mostly wondering if it's more fun to watch this way because of the all-killer no-thriller, hopefully some thriller, all-killer no-filler style of a video, or if you would rather have the full context. I tried to leave the context in for the intro to every skirmish, shall we say, so hopefully it shouldn't be too jarring. I'm not just honing in entirely on like the few seconds of conflict, but also you might just prefer the bits where I wander around. After all, the video in this series is secondary. But I don't know, let me know if you want. I never really get comments on my weekly Waypoint videos, which is fine. It's more of a public diary, I guess, in that regard, but you are always free to chip in and go, Christian, less of this type of game, or Christian, more of this type of game. I notice some types of games get less clicks, so like, you can literally just tell me and I'll probably just decide not to include that kind of game from now on. It's, you know, it's about my life, but the video game of choice, you can influence it. You have power. Well, to an extent. If you tell me you don't want to see any Halo, then I'm probably not going to listen to you because Halo's too fun to record. But anyway, enough faffing around. What have I been up to this week? On my week off, well, World of Warcraft. I'm back in, and I am back in hard? I don't want to say that sentence. I'm back in hook, line and sinker. I am playing both World of Warcraft Burning Crusade Classic and World of Warcraft Shadowlands non-classic. I still don't know what to call it. Retail, live, doesn't seem to make sense either way. It's just World of Warcraft. Now don't get me song? What? Now don't get me wrong, I've been subbed for the last 6 months. I've been kind of casually poking my head in for most of that time, but when I say I'm back into it, I mean I'm really back into it. Hilariously, my 6-month sub just expired as soon as I got the itch to really get back into WoW again, but with the advent of Season 4 in Shadowlands, well, I was planning to just like mainline LFR for the Slime Cat, but they removed Slime Cat from LFR on a PTR just before it went live, which is a whole lot of acronyms that people who don't play WoW aren't going to understand. I do apologise. But basically, the lowest level of raid content allows you to queue into a raid with a bunch of random people, which is the way I do raiding because I work odd hours and I have social anxiety. And you might think, how does that work? Aren't random people harder to hang out with? But in a video game, I would rather not accidentally wipe a raid inside a guild full of people who all know me and would be annoyed with me, potentially, for years to come. So yeah, I was slightly bummed when they took that Slime Cat mount out of the reward pool for doing Season 4 LFR, but I was so amped up to do LFR because of the Slime Cat anyway, which is something I really haven't done much of since Legion. I haven't cleared an entire raid since Legion, which is nearly 6 years ago for those of you who aren't in the World of Warcraft space. Or at least the beginning of it was. But either way, it made me realise that Slime Cat or no Slime Cat, I just fancied getting back into the endgame of WoW in a way I haven't done for ages as well. I mean, this pairs up with me saying I haven't finished a raid in like 6 years, but normally when I play WoW, the way I play WoW is by farming old raids for transmog, by collecting mounts, by collecting pets, by leveling alternate characters. That's how I primarily play WoW. I haven't been interested in the endgame of WoW really, like I do it, but kind of casually, in a long time. But for this week, for whatever reason I did. I cleared all of Castle Nathria on the fated difficulty, which isn't really that different in the LFR. It just adds, I think it adds some ads which, you know, you need to interrupt and kill in some of the boss fights, that's about it. Oh, and it obviously bumps the item level requirement and the general item level scaling of the entire raid fight. So, for instance, it's not just super easy to nuke down the bosses with the latest raid tier gear, it's synced up to the latest raid tier in terms of difficulty. That's what I should have said from the start. But yeah, it was fun. Only got one piece of loot, sadly, but I am looking forward to trying to cobble together a whole frickin' what's the word, tier of gear over the course of the season. I wasn't content just to do that though, no. Every expansion I have a run where I decide to try and get into PvP, and it never sticks, but this is that time of the expansion already, and I was like, sure. I looked at my recently boosted Dark Ranger, who I boosted with my pre-order bonus, and I was like, I don't see her as being like a PvP character in terms of her lore, her backstory and all of that, but in terms of just gameplay, sure, Hunter's fun to play in PvP. I forgot how much Hunter is fun to play in PvP. I constructed that sentence wrong, but let's move past it. The thing that really surprised me about PvP in Shadowlands, I don't know if this is a general consensus or if I'm just weird or whatever, but it turns out that the gearing system for PvP gear is extremely fun and extremely simple, and I think the reason why it's extremely fun might also be because it's extremely simple. You literally earn honor in battlegrounds and, you know, arenas and stuff like that, and you just spend a damn honor on the damn pieces of gear that you want to buy from the honor vendor, and you can also upgrade those pieces of honor gear at the upgrade areas near the vendor as well, up to like 7 times or something, and I'll be damned if it isn't just super satisfying to do that. Like, there are so many different progression systems in WoW over the years in terms of gearing up, and it turns out the most fun one is just the most simple one, the most classic one, because as far as I'm aware, this is how it used to be in the past, and this is what everyone wanted for Shadowlands for ages, right? I remember there being a whole bring back PvP vendors movement, and now I understand why. It's not entirely that simple. There's also a second PvP currency called Conquest, which you earn mostly through rated PvP, but if you don't do that, there's also like a Conquest bar you fill up by doing non-rated PvP, and you do also get some Conquest points from doing quests, PvP related quests, and I think just PvP in general as well, just quite slowly, and that is another vendor that you can go and spend your money on, your Conquest points on even, to earn even more higher item level gear, which is also its own transmog set and stuff like that, and it's just satisfying and fun. Ephemeros, which is the name of my Dark Ranger, is currently decked out in full honor gear, and also has some Conquest gear already as well, and I'm looking forward to continuing her PvP progression journey. And of course you've got the whole cosmetic PvP progression across all expansions and characters, which is nice to be advancing as well. I've almost got my bronze horse. My friend, who I used to be in a guild with years ago, saw me doing PvP, by the way, and messaged me like, are you doing PvP? And I'm like, yeah, hello, I'm bored, it's fun. In other news of games I've been playing this week, I also tried Far Cry 5, and that game left a very strong first impression with me. I was like, wow, this is really fun, this is really pretty as well. It's seems like a really well fleshed out and, actually, I hate to say it, but polished game. I know that Far Cry is kind of famous for its bugs, but at least the version of Far Cry 5 I'm playing seems really polished. It's very immersive. It reminds me a little bit of Skyrim in the way it does immersion, like immersive gameplay, like how it's all first person and you're going through the world, and I don't know, it just seems really cool that way. However, the longer I play Far Cry 5 for, turns out that's a hard name to say, the longer I play it for, the less impressed I actually am, because while its base gameplay is really good, that's pretty much all it's got going for it in the end, because the story is basically, wow, the cultists have risen up and taken over the map. go clear out these map objectives. Just go and clear them all out. I'm struck by the fact that the best way of describing it is, for those familiar with Assassin's Creed games, I recently finished the Assassin's Creed Origins story and DLCs, and all I have left to do now for the achievements is to go around and clear every camp on the map. And it feels like a lot of games are like that, like they have a really good story mode and like all of this interesting stuff about a game. And then at the end of it, when you've done all the story mode and learned everything, all that's left to do is to go and clear the icons on the map. And it feels like, while that's most video games kind of like end of game cleanup thing to do, and that can be fun, that's the entire game for Far Cry 5. And to be fair, I've only put like 2 hours into it. And there are systems like, you know, companion systems, upgrade systems, stuff like that, and there's maybe stuff I haven't met or come across yet, but it just feels like they took objective completion, open world objective completion, and made that the entire game, like Crackdown 3 for instance. And while it's fun, it wears you down quickly. I don't want to say it gets boring quickly, because it's never boring, but it's, I don't know how to put it, and I don't know if this is a common opinion or if other people feel this way, but that's my takeaway from the game so far. Like, I'm not opposed to the idea of going back to it, playing it a bit more, and maybe it'll rub off a bit better on me if I go and do that, but I don't know, maybe not. I might not go back. Quick comic book update before I end the video, because I've been talking about comics a lot in the recent weekly waypoints. In terms of reading Daredevil, have pretty much got to the end of Volume 2. I've got to the Shadowland event, and I think I've come to the opinion that I don't like reading cross-comic events. Even when I've got a reading guide, it never feels coherent. Even having read all of the like hundreds of issues of backstory for the Shadowland event for Matt Murdock, even reading like the other comics of like the other characters and their perspectives and points of view between the issues, like even knowing everything, because I tried House of X a while back and just didn't have context for anything, it was a bad idea, but or House of M, sorry, I think it's called, one of those two titles. But even this for Shadowland, I just wish Marvel Comics would stick to their own comic runs, their own comic lines, because if this Shadowland story had been told from Daredevil's point of view mostly in his comics, I don't know, I feel like I'm only 2 issues into Shadowland and like the accompanying issues that go between those two, but I don't feel the pull to go and continue reading it like I have for literally the last like 150 Daredevil comics or whatever I've read. Instead, I've been reading the old Amazing Spider-Man comics because I have finally surpassed the point that I had read up to before. I mentioned previously that I had read some of the comics before, but I couldn't quite remember where I'd last gotten up to, and then I kind of figured it out. So I've got past that point now, and when you get to issue 150, comicbookreadingorders.com recommends you skip to issue like 230 or something, which is like 7 years worth of comics later. And it's interesting because you do notice a shift. You do notice the story is told a little bit differently. The art isn't really like any more evolved, but it is slightly different, and like the mannerisms between characters are different. But I've got to give credit to comicbookreadingorders.com. While you definitely do feel like you've missed some stuff, like it feels more like a time skip that's actually been written into the story than an actual, you know, skipping of 70 issues worth of comics, because the way Amazing Spider-Man at least does it is, you know, you're like, oh, here's a Black Cat. Last time I saw Black Cat, this was happening, that happens to have been in the gap of comics I missed, so I'm quickly brought up to speed, and I don't have to read through the comics, which, by that website's own admission, are the ones worth skipping because they're just not very good. Or important, for that matter. There's no, like, vital plot. Because they do say, like, for instance, the Clone Conspiracy Saga, or whatever it's called, isn't very good, but they still recommend reading it because it's very important for Peter Parker, you know? That kind of thing. But yeah, that's a comic update. This was a weekly waypoint. This was a Halo video. Hope you enjoyed. If you did enjoy, please remember to leave a like. If you didn't enjoy, you don't have to leave that like. Not gonna force you. Remember, you can let me know in the comments below which version of a Halo match you preferred, whether you preferred the kind of montage of the deaths and kills, or if you just preferred it raw. See you next week!